Greetings, Rabbi Griscott here with your video Mishnah and Maleh service for March 19th, the yard sites for tonight, the 24th of Adar. Frederico Adler, Sophie Allen, Minnie Cohn, Abraham Denowitz, Jeanette Dabrowski, Nathan Dunn, Ben Garber, Retta Goldstein, Louise Goodman, Abe Greenberg, Herbert Horowitz, Helen Kubel, Leah Nussbaum, Abe Rovin, Peter Schultz, Sonia Schultz, Mary Slobosky, and Rachel Studnut. May their memory be for a blessing, and our Mishnah study is in the merit of their memory. So we're up to the third Mishnah of Tractate Pesachim, which is about Pesach, the third Mishnah of chapter 10. Heviu Lefanov. So at that point, they used to bring before the head of the household his vegetables to dip in the karpas, and metabel b'chazeres ad shemagila parperes hapas. So he dips and eats his lettuce. Usually they use lettuce until he gets to the course of the secondary bread. That's probably the translation of that term, which means the matzah, the poor man's bread. Okay, so the Mishnah is saying that the karpas is like an appetizer. It comes before the matzah. Okay, so what is karpas all about? Why do we dip karpas in the first place? There's 1,000 reasons given for everything we do at the Seder. And for that, you have to tune into my Seder class tonight on Zoom, which is at 8 p.m., and we're going to put out the login information for that. But for these purposes of just explicating the Mishnah, maybe I'll give sort of the simplest or the what I think is the plainest explanation. The karpas, which we dip in salt water, the vegetable that we dip in salt water is simply an appetizer, and that's the sign of a free man's meal, of a fancy meal in ancient times. It started with a vegetable with a dip of some kind, and when you're dipping, that's a sign of freedom and of fanciness. So that's probably just the plain. And of course, we add all sorts of other reasons. The salt water represents the tears of the slaves. Alternatively, it could represent the Red Sea, which split. But I think the appetizer reason is the plain meaning. Sometimes the boring reason is kind of the most truthful one, and then rabbis and holy Jews over the ages add beautiful homiletic reasons on top of it in addition. And they're all true in their own way. So, Heviu lefanav matzah v'chazeres v'charoses u'shnei tavshilin. At that point, you bring before the head of the household matzah, of course, lettuce for maror this time, charoset, and 2 cooked dishes. So this is usually in our day and age, we have all this stuff on the table ready to go. But back then, apparently, they would bring it onto the table. Even nowadays, many Jews have the custom to either cover the foods at a certain point and then uncover them, or put them off the table onto the side and bring them back to the table. And all of that sort of arouses the curiosity of the children. We want to get the kids to ask questions. Why are you doing this? We want them to notice it. So you cover the food, you uncover it, and the kids will say, hey, what's that? You also practically just have to keep kids awake until midnight or so, right? So anyway, what would they bring in? They'd bring in matzah, of course you need. Lettuce, romaine lettuce was probably the original maror. It's a little bit bitter. People tend to think horseradish is the real maror. Romaine lettuce is for wimps who can't handle the horseradish. It's probably not true. Originally, it was probably actually romaine lettuce. It's a little bit bitter, and that suffices to make it maror. The charoset. People have different recipes for charoses. But apples, pomegranates, figs, dates, walnuts, and almonds in wine, delicious, nice little mixture, and 2 cooked dishes. So these 2 cooked dishes in our Seder plate have become standardized as a shank bone of a lamb or the thigh of a chicken, but usually the shank bone of a lamb and an egg. Okay, so what is the shank bone and the egg all about? We don't eat those. Some people do have the custom to eat them later on, but generally they're just there for show, for symbolic reasons. So these are representative of the 2 sacrifices that we would have been eating at the night of the Seder if we had a temple in Jerusalem, the temple which will be rebuilt when the Messiah comes on the Temple Mount. But we sort of have this in memory. What are those 2 sacrifices? There's the Korban Pesach. There's the Passover sacrifice. You get a bunch of people to go in together on a lamb or a goat. A group of 10 or 20 people would bring their lamb or goat to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem on the eve of Pesach, and it would be sacrificed. And then you'd sit in Jerusalem and you'd eat it that night. That's why we say next year in Jerusalem. Ideally, if there's a temple, the Pesach Seder, all Jews in the world are supposed to have their Seder in Jerusalem in the environs of the temple. So we have the shank bone of a lamb in memory of the lamb that was offered as the Pesach sacrifice. The shank bone also represents the Zeroa Netuya, God's outstretched arm, which he stretched out to save us in Egypt. Now, the egg represents the other sacrifice, the one people forget about. There's a generic chagiga, korban chagiga, a festival sacrifice, which you would have brought on the eve of Pesach to be eaten that night. And the egg is in memory of the festival sacrifice. Now, the festival sacrifice was also an animal. It was not a chicken or an egg. So, but it seems to be that, again, I like to give the plain meaning. Eggs are cheap. They come from an animal, so it's sort of close enough. You want to distinguish it from the shank bone, which is in memory of the Passover offering. But there are all sorts of other reasons why the egg. One is an egg is universal to the spring. A spring is a time of rebirth in nature, and an egg is a sort of embryo, right? As something that's would have been about to be born. Our Christian brethren probably took the idea of the Easter egg from Pesach. Have you ever thought about that connection? There's a lot of connections there. An egg also is circular and therefore represents the cycle of life. And on Pesach Eve, we want to remember that we're free now, but we always think dialectically. But there have been times where we haven't been free or haven't been as free, and you always have to remember the sort of cycle of life. So you have the shank bone and the egg on the Seder plate. And then finally, in terms of the charoset, the Mishnah says, Afal pisha ein charoset mitzvah. It's kind of a surprising statement. We eat charoset even though it's not a mitzvah. When was the last time you heard rabbis in a Mishnah or a Talmudic Jewish law context say you should do something, but it's not a mitzvah? If you do it, isn't that a definition of a mitzvah? It's something you have to do. So there's a dispute about this, a rabbinic dispute. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Tzadok Omer, mitzvah. No, Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok says, no, it is a mitzvah. Uva mikdash hayom mevi'in lefanav gufo shel Pesach. We'll get back to the charoset, but the last line is, and in the temple times, they would also bring him, of course, the body of the Pesach offering, the meat of the Pesach offering to eat the roasted lamb. But anyway, back to charoset. So the Talmud ends up elaborating, if it's not a mitzvah, then what exactly is it? And one opinion says, well, it became sort of customary to take the edge off of the maror. So maror's bitter is lettuce. And we are used to having lettuce ourselves in the context of salad, right? But when's the last time you just picked up a piece of romaine lettuce and ate it? It's a little too bitter. That's kind of the point, right? But people want to take the edge off by dipping it into this sweet mixture of charoset. So it became sort of customary, but it's not something smart to do. Maybe health-wise, you don't want something too bitter, but it's not quite a mitzvah, according to that opinion. But according to the other opinion, no, it is a mitzvah, and there's a couple reasons given. The most popular reason is, no, it is symbolic. It represents the mortar and the bricks that the Jewish slaves had to use to build things in Egypt. So, which would be fitting to dip the maror into it. The maror is the bitter herbs representing the bitterness of our slavery. You dip it into the brick mixture, so to speak. And that's what we generally teach people, what we teach kids. So that view seems to have prevailed. And this is all part of the dialectic I've mentioned, that on Pesach, we have these two ideas in mind. We're celebrating freedom, but we're also remembering slavery. So this all serves as a good preview for my Haggadah class in just a few hours from now, 8 p.m. tonight on Zoom, and look in your email for that login information. Okay, we will say the El Maleh Rachamim for those who have the art site tonight. Once again, if you have a Hebrew name of someone, it's preferable to use the Hebrew name. I have the list of English names here, but email me or let me know. You could email right here on the, for those watching on Facebook Live, or my address, rabbi@kisyn.org. Okay. El Maleh Rachamim Shochein Bamiromim Hamitzei Menucha Nefona Al Kanfei HaShechina B'Malos Kedoshim Utahorim Kizor Harakia Masirim Es Nishmos Kol HaNiftarim Hazkarot Shel Hayom Shalchu Li'olamam Ba'avor Shemispalim Bad Hazkaras Nishmasam Began Eden Tehei Menuchasam Lachein Bal Harachamim Yastirehem B'Seser Kenafav Li'olamim V'yitzror B'tzorach Hayim Es Nishmasam Adonai Hu Nachlasam Yanuchu B'Shalom Mishkavam V'Nomar Amen. And in English, O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the sheltering wings of your presence. in the lofty levels of the holy and pure, who shine like the glow of the firmament, to the souls of those whose yahrzeits are observed tonight in our community, the 24th of Adar. Frederico Adler, Sophie Allen, Minnie Cohn, Abraham Denowitz, Jeanette Dabrowski, Nathan Dunn, Ben Garber, Retta Goldstein, Louise Goodman, Abe Greenberg, Herbert Horowitz, Helen Kubel, Leah Nussbaum, Abe Rovin, Peter Schultz, Sonia Schultz, Mary Slabosky, and Rachel Studna, in whose memory we pray. May their resting place be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore may the Master of Mercy shelter them in the shelter of his wings for eternity. May he bond their soul in the bond of life. Hashem is their heritage, and may they rest in peace. And we say Amen. Tomorrow is Friday, which means it's Erev Shabbos, and we're going into another Shabbat, confined in our homes, not able to go to shul, but let's really strengthen this virtual community that we've created. It's really been heartening to see the responses I've received that people are happy to stay connected in this modern way, and we're blessed to have that option. So stay well, stay safe, try not to get cabin fever and go stir crazy, and take care.